Go.
Hi guys, it's Colin and Shy, of course, and we're here doing another quick video on slicing. There's lots of slicers out there. It's not really about what's the best slicer. We're just going to talk about some of the issues and pitfalls and successes we've had in slicing and printing large models. So do you want to start, Shay?
Yeah, so the biggest thing about slicing big models that I never realized is really some of the power of the laptop you have actually comes into a lot more consideration than before. Not necessarily that you need a much more powerful laptop, but if you think about it, if you took, let's say, the small bench you had before to a large bench, now you have a lot more triangles in that model to slice and for the slicer to chew through. So it's really some slicers perform better than others in that case because either they take advantage of the video card in your laptop, or let's say you're on a Mac, it's a more closed system, so they can perform better and utilize the system resources better. So it really, those things now come into a lot more importance, right? And if you just take your normal i3 and you have a model that's like a Benchy and you scale it to the maximum size of the, it's going to be slightly slower, but it's not going to be a huge difference. But imagine if you're taking that same model and you're slicing it from, let's say the i3 size of let's say 150 by 150 by 150 Benchy, and you slice it up to a 350 by 350 by 350 for the ENIAC. That's not, I think, like 6 times as big, or whatever the math is, but it's exponentially bigger. So even if it's a hollow model and you let's say hollow and leave you one shell, it still takes longer. So it's something really to pay attention to and be aware of, and different slicers will perform differently.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I was going to say the same. The reason I built my ENIAC 40 is for helmets and stuff like Shay's saying. So obviously, if you start, Shay's talking about scaling a small model just as an example to cope with dealing with a model. Now, in his example, a Benchy is relatively simple. I've been designing some stuff like large helmets and putting them on S3D, which is all I use, to be fair. And it does struggle. Like Shay says, if you're trying to use a laptop or a not very powerful PC, it does take time. Now, I always find it takes a lot of time to give you the preview. When you get to the preview, the first probably tip I would say is if you're using S3D, there's a way to cut the layers away. There's 2 sliders, so you can just show a proportion of the model. So when you're manipulating around it to try and find what places to put support or anything like that, then I usually use these 2 sliders to narrow it down to say a section like that of a big helmet, say. Then you just narrow it down, and then you can manipulate really easily around the model and do whatever changes and inspect what you want. If I was to leave the whole model there in print preview, it locks up and I can't spin round. I'm using a Mac, as Shay said, which is a closed system, but even so, it's very slow. So the first sort of point I would say, if you're using S3D, is use them sliders to make the model, or I should say, like a slice of the model for where you need to look. And as you obviously want to pan up the model, move both slicers so you're just previewing a section of the model at a time and not trying to preview the whole model. Shame.
That's a very good point. I've done the same thing in the slicers I've used too. The other thing I'll call out too is that slicing quality aside for a second. So we're not talking about the quality of the actual slicing software, but the just slicing time and how well the slicer processes the models. I've tried Simplify 3D, Craftware, Cura, Slicer. I tried the online one, Kirimoto. I think that was the 5 I tried. I don't remember if there was another one I tried. But it's really interesting to see. Slicer will choke on the model. I mean, I've had a model like the there, for example, like this Statue of Liberty here. Simplify 3D had no issues with the model, right? I did what Colin said. I just had the portion when I was doing the preview and then looked at sections at a time. But Simplify 3D had no issue slicing the model in about 5 minutes, and then reslicing and reslicing and having that preview over and over again. Craftware did it too. But slicer completely choked. As soon as I turned on any kind of support, forget it. I would turn on supports and leave slicer running for a day and a half over the weekend, and it still was not getting through the actual slicing of the model. So I wouldn't even get to the preview part of it.
Oh, that's interesting. No.
Simplify 3D would take maybe, like, I think of that model with the supports took like 10 minutes to get to the preview one time. Craftware was a little faster. So for me, just on my laptop and the speed, at least, I find Craftware is almost instantaneous, from the actual slicing of the model to the preview to how I manipulate the model around, to the actual exporting the model too. Craftware is almost instantaneous. Simplify 3D is slightly faster. Slicer is impossible to use and takes forever to do anything, even just exporting the model. And then Cura is usable, but still takes a significant time. So it's just an interesting.
I do find, I don't know if anyone else finds it or whether I'm imagining it, but in S3D, once you've previewed it once, when you jump back to your build bed and then jump back to a preview, it's a lot quicker once it's generated the preview the first time. I don't know if people find that. For instance, I was printing a Stormtrooper helmet with a shed load of support at 45 degrees on the bed to try and minimize the support. Jump back, and then the next time, where the first time it took 10 minutes to preview, it literally took 2 or 3 minutes. So I do find once you previewed once, it's not so bad. So don't be afraid to sort of jump in and out.
Yeah, so I'll bring up. I just grabbed another model here. One of the things too is, overhangs and bridging area. Something that you don't really think about. But if you're printing this model, let's say, at its normal size, which I think was 3 times smaller than this, it's not really an issue to do this bridge here or do some of these overhang, the eyelids here, right? Those generally come up fine. There's no teeth on this thing, but some of the overhangs, like on the bottom down here where the I guess the breathing hole is, right? Those are not really an issue when you have a smaller print. You can easily overhang those by 2-3 millimeters sometimes, and it's fine. But if you take that, let's say 2 millimeter overhang and scale this 4 times, right? That's now becoming an 8 millimeter overhang that you now need supports for. So that's what I find a lot of times too, is that sometimes in a model I'll print one how it's a model that prints without supports. It bridges fine. There's no issues. But as soon as I take that same model and I scale it up 3 to 4 times on the ENIAC, all of a sudden now places that didn't need supports before now need supports.
Yeah, so it becomes a bit more crucial as well, your support settings. I don't know if you found this, Shay. I've tweaked a few as time's gone on to give myself the best surface layer after you've used support, because obviously when you're printing big models, and like Shay says, that an overhang can be epic in some of these large models. A lot of the time I tend to find I print whatever large model I'm printing at 45 degrees. So obviously no support, but obviously that's not practical for every model, because for instance, the Stormtrooper helmet I mentioned before, it was printed at 45, so there's literally about 1 millimeter of plastic of the actual helmet itself touching the heat bed, and then I had a little bit of support all around it just so it didn't lift, and then the rest pretty much printed without a great deal of support. But when you've got support, you've got to make sure that your support settings are spot on. And if anyone's interested in any sort of profiles that Shay uses or I use, we can post them.
Yeah, and then I don't know, a couple minutes left, I think. Right?
Yeah.
Okay. So the bottom of this model looks like crap because I haven't really cleaned up the support yet. But just want to bring up a point though. If you look at the side of the beak here, it looks almost, it's not flat, right? There's some curvature to the beak. Same thing on the bottom of here. There's some curvature here. So what I found interesting is, again, on the i3, if I print this, even though there's some slight curvature here, because the model is so small, that detail, and you can print this flat like that on the bed, and there's no issues. The little curvature up here will this will print this part, and then it'll print that little curve, and no issues really printing that curve. But what's interesting, when you scale it up this size, these curves now are significant enough to where if you place this flat on the bed, you don't have enough surface area touching the bed. It's an interesting thing that I ran across. That I don't know if you've had that issue, Colin, but I've found that in this case I had to use supports on the bottom here because there wasn't enough surface area.
Yeah, Agreed. For instance, going back to the same scenario, this Stormtrooper helmet, I got about 3/4 through a 6-day print, and one of the supports gave way. Now, usually at this point, I'd be like, oh, wasted print, start again, blah, blah, blah. But I just decided, no, I'm not going to waste the print. I got some quick drying glue and used some off-print plastic and just pinned it all back in place. So in that case, it saved the print. So don't be afraid that if you notice something going awry, to pause your print and do something about it. You will find it does happen on large prints. The reason it happened for me is I had a column of support that wasn't big enough. So it sort of wavered and sort of almost buckled under its own weight. So I just stuck a couple of bit of flat plastic in using a bit of epoxy glue onto parts of the model which are not going to be seen or on the inside, and it saved the print. So always be aware that there's still stuff you can do even if it goes wrong mid-print.
Yeah, and so I think along the lines too, something else I noticed that was interesting about, kind of saving your print and being more aware of not just, crossing your fingers and hoping for the best. Something like the Millennium Falcon, I think of, or some of the other sort of prints that don't have much surface area. On the Whitehouse, or I guess any other three or any other small printer, if it slightly lifts off the bed, if you have some imperfections where maybe the print's, supposed to be like this, but it's slightly wavy, it's moving, back and forth because it's not adhering perfectly. You can get away with that when it's a small model because the nozzle will come over, it'll drop a little plastic, and it'll move on. It's such a small amount to get away with those imperfections and that slight lifting. I've noticed on mine, when I have lifting from the bed even slightly, it's almost like because there's so much more plastic and the head moves around so much more, and there's so much more weight to it, that piece that's sort of wobbling is much more likely to fall over. And that's what happened like with my Millennium Falcon was, there was part of it that lifted. There's so much weight in the model that as soon as the head crashed into it, it was enough to knock it over.
Yeah. So just really, the days are gone really on the Whitehouse and the i3s and the small printers where you can slice something, accept your slicer settings and print and off you go. For instance, one of the prints I've done recently was Optimus Prime helmet. I think I posted it. I designed it in CAD and then printed it out. I designed it to make it as printy friendly as possible. But as I've lost my train of thought. It's gone. What was we just saying?
The helmet that maybe that it came off the bed, or that the time to actually slice it.
Yeah. So yeah, that's right. That was the point I was making. So I spent 45 minutes to an hour putting in handmade rafts around supports, and just adding a bit of surface layer to that base layer to keep it fixed to the bed, like Shay said. So you can't really nowadays just let automatic support and go away. You have to think about how much contact is in on that heat bed, and how it's going to print, and you have to analyze it. If I'm doing a big print now, I'll probably spend at least 45 minutes to an hour slicing it and being 100% happy, because when you're 4 or 5 days into a print, you don't want it to go wrong, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's true. I kind of think about that too. Is these prints now, whereas on the Whitehouse or those i3s, maybe you're running like a 20-hour post, or maybe it's really fine detail and it's like a 25-hour print. But these prints on the ENIAC easily go for sometimes 40 or 60 hours. And so you're right. I mean, I do find myself spending like 45 minutes to an hour sometimes just sitting and slicing that one. Whereas before on the Whitehouse, I could just even do it for my phone in like 5 minutes.
Yeah. But I think that's sort of the price you pay to have the big scale. I don't think it's really an issue. You're just not going to. So before I would think, oh, I'm going out in 10 minutes. I'd just quickly set this up, print going. I wouldn't do that now. I'd say, right, okay, this is a big print. I'll separate off some time to slice it. And I think that just becomes the norm, and you accept that with large scale printing. But yeah, again, the results way outweigh the time you spend slicing, without a shadow of a doubt. For me, it's helmets and armor and all that sort of stuff. So the post-process time after that is a heck of a lot less. So if I have to spend an hour slicing a model rather than 30 hours sanding parts that I've joined together, it's a small price to pay, really.
Yeah, and I mean, for me, it's the same thing. I agree too. It's even though this looks like, to me, I mean, this is awesome for my kids and their school. I mean, to have, it's not life size, but
Yeah,
this is certainly much better of a size to take to school and show off than a little tiny model about that size.
yeah.
So I mean,
Or get lost in the back kid's bag or
yeah,
whatever.
yeah. So definitely worth it for the, at least for me from the kids' perspective. Just not something I was ever aware of that, hey, now slicing can take you, an hour versus the 5 or 10 minutes. And even just watching that first layer on a normal print, first layer is, maybe takes like 2 minutes to lay down that first layer, but on a large print, it could take you, maybe 10 minutes to lay down that first layer.
Yeah. On one of my prints recently, it was literally 45 minutes with the first layer.
Oh yeah.
But then I knew I was going to get bed adhesion, and it was just the way I decided to print it. But yeah, so just be aware of these little things, really. And I think really we sort of just about covered it. Do you think there, Shay? People can ask questions. We can sort of give them our experience. But other than that,
yeah, I was checking. Yeah, there's no lot of questions, and I was just checking the group again. There's no questions came in through there.
Just post.
But yeah, I mean,
group, can't they?
Yeah, post in the group there. But yeah, I mean, this is not. I haven't seen any videos. I mean, there's all the people out there with the big printers, and I haven't seen any videos talking about, slicing big. And we thought it was something important to keep you guys aware of.
Maybe moving forward, myself or Shay will film ourselves slicing. I know it won't be the most exciting thing in the world, but just talk you through why we're doing certain things on a certain model, which you can sort of relate to something else. Maybe that's something we can do if enough people show interest.
I agree.
Okay, guys, I think that's it for today. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.
See you guys.
See ya.